Okay, welcome to Commsverse. This session is called The Ultimate Guide to Teams External Sharing, and today will be presented to you by Frane Borazan. Frane, over to you.
Hello, Peter. Thank you for introducing me. I will start with the session. Thank you all for coming to this session, the ultimate guide to Teams external sharing. And thank you, Peter, for introducing me. Okay, so I wanted to create a session basically that will allow people to understand the external sharing, the guest access, the sharing links more in details with the teams. So I wanted to have everything in one place. So the level for the session is 100, so it's pretty much basic things. So we'll learn what we can do with the external sharing, with the external users, with the guest users, sharing links, and so on in this session. Okay. So my name is Frane Borazan, and I'm the co-founder and the president of Sysket. And this is my first time at the Commsverse, and so far I really like the conference. I see there are a lot of speakers and a lot of our sponsors. I want to thank to these sponsors. And this is the online event this year, but I'm really looking forward for the offline event next year because I believe that events are the great way to be introduced to the different people and to learn. And this is what I really like to learn about the technology that we are all interested in. So these are the sponsors for this year event, and I would really like to thank them because without the sponsors, this kind of events would not be possible. Please, if you have time after the session or later today, please visit their booths in the teams. They would be really happy if you have some questions, if you can learn about what they are offering to us. Okay, so let's start with the session. First, I will try to explain a difference between the external users, between the guest users versus the regular team user. So if we want to communicate with the users from other companies, we have two possibilities. So we have external access, or so-called federation. Basically, federation is when you need a solution that lets external users in other domains find, call, chat, and set meetings with you. External users have no access to your organization teams or team resources. And please select, I recommend to select external users when you want to communicate with the users, external users who are still on the Skype for Business, for example, online or on premises. External access is turned on by default in Teams, and this means basically your organization can communicate with all external domains. If you want external users to have access to Teams and channels, then guest access might be a better way to go. Guest access, use it if you want to add a user to a team where they can chat, call, meet, and collaborate or on organization files that are stored in the SharePoint or OneDrive. They can use Microsoft 365 or Office 365 apps such as Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And basically, a guest user can be given nearly all the same capabilities as the native team member. Guests are added to your organization Active Directory. This is the biggest difference between the external user and the guest user. And to communicate with the guest has to be signed to Teams using their guest account. And basically this means that the guest may have to sign out of their own team and to sign in your Teams account. Guest users have access to more resources in Teams, and of course, like I mentioned before, they can access files, teams, and channels, which is the difference than the external or so-called federated users in Teams. Okay, let's see what are the differences between the external access versus the guest access. So I put together a table where basically you can check, of course, these slides will be shared with you later on, so there is no need to screenshot or to take notes about this, but basically you have a table where you can see what are the things that external access users can do versus the guest users. And you can see that the external access users are missing quite few things from the guest users, and all refer to the collaboration on files. Like I said before, a guest user can be given nearly all the same Teams capabilities as the native team member. Again, really important to understand, because you will have the activity of all your guest users. Guest users are added to your organization Azure AD. To communicate with the guest, he needs to be signed in the Teams using in your Teams using their guest account, and this means, of course, they need to sign out of their Teams. Guest users have access to more resources, and the Teams admin controls everything that guest can or can't do through the Teams admin center. Okay. Organization Teams users versus the guest user. So I wanted to compare what a team member in your organization can do versus the guest user who is sitting also in your Azure AD. So please have in mind that this can change. So I have updated this maybe a month ago, something like that. So in meanwhile, if something has changed, there can be another check mark somewhere on in some particular feature or permission that the guest user is able to do in Teams. And Microsoft every day is adding new capabilities to guest users, so they are able over time to do more and more things in the Microsoft Teams. Okay, which type of access to choose? So I will try to describe some use cases from the real life where you can decide what type of access you can choose. Use external Teams access for those users outside your organization with who you need just to communicate, just to exchange some kind of communication, and not to collaborate on files. Also, if you don't have to work with specific people and want to allow any person from the external domain to communicate with you on the Teams, this is a good option to go. Teams guest access, when you want to have people outside your organization, such as partners, vendors, suppliers, or consultants, to have access to Teams and to most important documents in channel resources and applications. So for example, let's say that your marketing team collaborates with an external advertising agency, and they want to share some files between them, do regular meetings, collaborate on tasks, and communicate regularly via Teams. In that case, you should add one or a couple of guest users from the advertising agency to your Azure AD through their email address, and then you should create a dedicated team inside Microsoft Team that focuses on, for example, advertising matters and that gives guest access to them. Once you add those people from the marketing agency, they will be marked with the guest tag. Okay, now I will try to explain how really simply to set up the external access and the guest access in your Microsoft Teams tenant. Scenarios for setting Teams external access. So we have Open Federation. This is the default setting that we all receive in the Teams, and it lets your people in your organization find, call, chat, and set up meeting with the people outside your organization in any domain. So in this scenario, your users can communicate with all external domains. And if they are running Teams or, for example, Skype for Business, they're using Open Federation, and their domain is added to their allow list. Another setting that we have for Teams external access is allow specific domains. This means basically by adding domains to an allow list, you limit external access to only allow domains, while all other domains will be blocked. And the third option that we have is block specific domains. Basically, this means by adding domains to a block, you can communicate with all external domains except the ones that you have blocked. Okay. So let's move on. How to set up? So you understood now really quickly how to set up external access in your Teams tenant, and now I will try briefly to explain in kind of a checklist what you need to do in the SharePoint, in the Azure AD, in the Teams, how to set up Teams guest access. Okay. First, we need to set up the Azure AD. We will open Azure portal, and we will go to Azure AD user settings, external users, and there we'll manage external collaboration settings. We have few options available. I will just walk you through really quickly. Guest users permissions are limited. This means this policy determines permissions for guests in your directory. You need to select yes to block users from certain directory tasks, for example, like enumerating users, groups, or other directory resources. You want to select no here to give guests the same access to directory data as your regular users that you have. Admins and users in guest inviter role can invite. Basically, this means to allow admins and users in the guest inviter role to invite guests, and you need to set this policy to yes. The third option that we have is members can invite. This means basically that to allow non-admin members of your directory to invite guests, set this policy to yes, and this is recommended. If you prefer that only admins are able to add the guests, so you do not grant a lot of control to your users, then you need to set this policy to no. Please keep in mind that setting to no will limit guest experience for non-admin team owners. They will not be able to add guests in teams. They have already been added by the Azure AD by the administrator. Guests can invite. The fourth option is basically to allow guests to invite guests. Set this policy to yes, but currently Microsoft Teams do not support this inviter role. So if you set this to yes, guests will not be able to invite other guests in Teams. And the last option that we have, and that is in the preview, is basically the email. This is really great. Basically, the email one-time passcode feature authenticates guest users when they cannot be authenticated through the Azure AD, Microsoft account, or Google Federation. So with one-time passcode authentication, there is no need to create a Microsoft account when the guest user redeems an invitation or accesses any shared resource that was shared with him. He will get another email with a temporary code, and then that code, of course, will be sent to his email address, and he will be required to enter that code in order to enter document that has been shared with him. Okay. After we set up the Azure AD, we need to enable guest access in Teams. To do this, you need to open Teams Admin Center, go to Settings, Organization-wide Settings, Guest Access, and enable Allow Guests Access in Teams. By default, of course, this setting is disabled. After you enable this setting, below you will be able to control what exactly the guest is able to do. On the same page, you can control things like calling, meeting, allowing video messaging, what they can do with the messages to delete, edit, or for example, use memes and stuff like that. Keep in mind that this is officially by Microsoft that this guest access can take anywhere from 2 hours to 24 hours, but I saw lately they have decreased this time. So usually for me, for the test tenants I'm using, it usually takes an hour to enable this. Okay. After we set the teams in the Teams admin, we need to configure the Microsoft or Office 365 groups. These steps here are just for your reference for later on, where you can find these exact settings to enable this. So this is kind of a checklist for the people to ease their life. So open Admin Center settings, organization settings, and then Office 365 group access. Basically, first checkbox allows users outside your organization to access content that was shared with them. And the option below basically allows group owners to add people outside the organization by themselves. Okay, so when we configured Office 365 groups, we need to configure sharing. Sharing in the Microsoft 365. I'm still using the word Microsoft 365. I'm in this space for like 10 plus years, and I'm used to call this Office 365. So I'm just using I'm just trying to change the keyword for this. So I'm just trying to use the Microsoft 365 because Microsoft has changed a lot of changed this keyword from the Office to the Microsoft 365. Okay, so basically, to configure sharing in the Microsoft 365, you need to go to this exact setting, and bear in mind that this settings is the same setting as I explained before in the Azure AD members can invite. So basically, if you did this setting before, you can skip this step. So it will be checked for you. So there is no need to enable it. Configure sharing in the SharePoint. First, we need to do it organization-wide. You need to open Admin Center of the SharePoint, go to Policies and Sharing. So in order to use the sharing links and the sharing for anyone, you need to set the slider to the top setting. That is the most permissive setting. And basically, if you want something that is more strict, where your users are required to log in, you can change the slider later on, but for the sake of this presentation, I will use the most permissive setting. If you set the slider to anyone, then underneath it will new setting will appear where you can set how the sharing links will behave. So I recommend by default this is not enabled. So this expiration for the for the sharing links, and I recommend by policy to enable this because basically I will explain in just a minute what is a sharing link, but if you do not set this policy to expire, that means when some of your users share some of the content with anonymous users, they can share that further on, and then your content can be all over the place. So that is why I recommend to set this setting to expire, because after, let's say, 30 days, the link will expire, and if something needs to be shared again, you will be able, they will be required to create a new sharing link. But of course, you will have more control over it. After we configured the SharePoint in organization-wide, we need to configure each particular team. So in the SharePoint, we go to Sites and then Active Sites. We select, for example, on the screenshot, I selected the ComsWorth team. And we need to go to policies and then to external sharing. And again, for the sake of this presentation, I will select anyone. So basically, users will be able to share the files with anyone in outside the organization. Okay. We did a simple checklist. What needs to be changed in the Azure AD, in the Teams Admin Center, in the SharePoint Center, in the Office 365 Admin Center in order to use the guest user access. After we did all these settings, after we enabled everything, we'll try to add the first guest to your user. Of course, probably everybody in the room did this once if they're live. So once you enable the guest access and configure your setting, it's really easy to add the guest user. So only team owners can add guests in Teams. So if you are IT admin, you might need to make yourself an owner of a team before you start adding guests. And if you are not the owner, you can do that again in the Teams Admin Center. So please, if you have a test tenant, please try to configure all this and then to add at least yourself as the external user, because we always need to test whatever we configure in our environment. Okay, so this is really simple, adding guests to your team. Sharing links. So this is something that's really important, and what we need to pay attention to, because the things can go out of the control, because sharing links, if we do not set the expiry policy that I mentioned before, then our content can be all over the place, and the other external users, other external people can share our content, and we will not have a control who is accessing this sharing link. So I wanted briefly to explain what exactly each option for the sharing links means, so you are able to understand better what are the possibilities for your users. So we have 4 types of the sharing links. We have anyone, also known as anonymous link, and basically these links can only be made at the file or the folder level. The link provided will not require any authentication from the recipient, and they can simply click on the link and access whatever content it was shared with them. So I recommend to really use this carefully in your organization. People in your organization, this option is pretty straightforward. These links can be opened by the users of the same Office 365 tenant organization as the person is sharing. If forwarded to the external party, access denied message will appear for that external user. We have people with existing access. Basically, this option allows you to share the resource with users who have already been provided access to the current file, folder, document library site. And the 4th option that we have is the specific people, and this option allows you to share the specific with the specific email addresses, including guest users as well. Anonymous versus guest users is basically if you are working with the external party and you want to provide them access to certain documents, it's important to define whether you want recipients to be able to reshare or forward the document to somebody else. Basically, if you don't mind them being able to forward on them, or don't want them to go through the authentication process, then you will create anonymous link. However, if you need them to authenticate and verify their identity, you should use specific people to create guest user access. Okay, restricting guest users really briefly. In addition to using Microsoft 365 Admin Center and the Azure AD portal, you can use the Windows PowerShell to control also guest access. With PowerShell, you can allow or block guest access to all the teams and the Microsoft 365 groups. You can allow guests to be added to all teams and Microsoft 365 groups, and you can allow or block access, block guest users from a specific team or the Microsoft 365 group. You can also use PowerShell to allow or block a guest user based on their domain. For example, let's say your business has a partnership with another business. You can add that other domain to your allow list so your users can add those guests to their groups. For details, this is the reference that you can use where you can use PowerShell to control guest access. Okay, so I recommend following Microsoft Docs because Microsoft Docs is really a great platform, and Microsoft is really investing a lot of time to keep Microsoft Docs up to date with any changes that they make for the team platform. So Microsoft Docs is a great resource, not only for the Teams platform, but for all the Microsoft or Office 365. So I really recommend the first thing that you need to check are the Microsoft Docs. So I have for you a few PowerShell scripts that will ease your life in all this guest users and sharing links and stuff like that. So of course you will receive this presentation later on, and there will be links inside presentation where you can download these various links that I used personally as well. The first one is how to get all guest users in the Office 365 tenant. Basically, this will list all the guest users that either you or your users added to your tenant. You want to list, if you want, for example, to list external user and their status if they accepted the invitation. So sometimes it's important to get a report with the external users that only accepted the invitation, and this is the Azure CLI that will basically report only those users. Report guest accounts and their memberships in the Office 365 groups. So this is really awesome script that I recommend, because basically it will list guest accounts and where are their members. If they are members of the few Office 365 groups, this script will basically tell you that. Find guests in the Office 365 groups and teams where guests are prohibited. This is also important, and we need sometimes you want to find groups where guests are not enabled. And if you want, the last one is if you want to report guest accounts and their memberships of the Office 365 groups. Okay. You can, beside PowerShell and Microsoft Admin Center and their portal, you can use the third-party tools that will help you do all this. So third-party tool, you have the awesome Canadian company ShareGate. They have a tool that is SaaS-based where you can control guest users, external user access. It's called ShareGate Apricot. You have the 8-point cloud governance for the Office 365, so you can use it for the governance and various reporting of the different things in your environment. And there is a SysGetPoint. Basically, what SysGetPoint is doing is it will discover teams in your tenant and, of course, the associated Office 365 groups. You can find out who are the team owners, team members, and guest members. detect content where guest users have access, and of course remove that access if needed. And this is really cool, and I like this last feature a lot, to detect the sharing links from Teams, and of course to remove those if needed. Okay, so I hope I'm checking. I think that you saw on the camera that I'm checking my time every few minutes, and I believe that I'm okay with the time. Peter, am I good so far with the time?
Yes, Fran, you're all good.
Okay, great. So please, for the questions, please feel free to ask the questions in the Q&A. Please rate my session. So to rate it, go to this link. Date is, of course, today, but the time zone is Singapore. So I just checked yesterday. I'm not under London, so please, if you want to rate my session, please select the time zone Singapore, and the breakout session link is here on the screen, and also Peter will share the link with you guys so you can access it. And that's it for this session, Peter. If we have any sessions, if not, I will try to answer those in the breakout session. And please, guys, if you have something that you would like to ask me, please send me an email or contact me through the Twitter. Below is my blog, where usually I blog stuff about the Teams and SharePoint and Office 365. So please feel free to visit my blog as well.
Okay, thank you, Fran. That was absolutely brilliant. So looking at the Q&A, we don't have any questions at this time. So you've obviously explained things so brilliantly. Nobody has any queries. But what we can do then is say that that's all the time we have for this session. If anyone attending would like to spend a little bit more time and talk with Fran following the session, you'll be able to find him, as he's already mentioned, in the session breakout area, which I've just posted in the Q&A chat. So please go ahead and click that to join that meeting. And thank you again, Fran, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all.
Thank you.